Hello and welcome to the BronsCast. This is episode number 4 and it's called Creating Space. And for those of you who have not been following the BronsCast, my name's Dave Brons. I write music and this is a podcast aimed at encouraging people to get creative, get over the fear of putting their creativity out there. So be it composition, writing, art, whatever it is. But mainly I'm dealing with my medium, which is music. So if you are watching this on YouTube, you'll be able to see that in the background there is a beautiful lake and some mountains, and you can hear the sounds of nature. And I'm here in England in the Lake District. I'm feeling slightly self-conscious at filming a podcast in the middle of the countryside where people are walking past and wondering what I'm doing, sat with a video camera and a guitar in the middle of nowhere, talking in quite a loud voice. But hey, these are the things I do to bring you my creative ideas wherever I am. And I just thought about this creative space aspect. Now, on the BronsCast we've talked a lot about overcoming fear and fear being one of those barriers that stops us putting our thoughts and sharing our creativity with the world. Today I'm going to talk about creating space, and I'm not going to talk about creating space in a musical sense so much, rather as creating space to be creative, if you see what I mean. So we all live really busy lives. I'm a dad, I've got 2 kids, and one of the challenges is just finding time to be creative. Right now we're in such a rush. Our mobile phones, we have social media, we have TV, instant entertainment. There's so much kind of invading our time. And I think the temptation, especially if you're a guitar player like I am, is when you're trying to think of music, almost like the instrument itself can get in the way. Our tendency is just think, oh well, I've got a little bit of time. I could do a bit of practicing, or perhaps I'll sit down and try and do something on the instrument. And I think the thing is, what happens is we pick up the guitar and we end up rehashing a lot of the things that we've done before because of that, just kind of the connection to the instrument means we find ourselves in a lot of the same patterns. And that can happen the same too with composition, where you seem to get stuck in a dead end, in a bit of a rut. And I think that's kind of connected to this thing where we're in such a rush, it's such desperate, we need to just put something out there, we need to have our instruments in our time, and we haven't developed a habit of protecting our cognitive space, if you like. And what I mean by that is to create space where there is no real agenda, space just for thinking. And that's something that we're really bad at nowadays, and I think it's something that a lot of creative people who are successful at being creative have learned to appreciate, the time creating space where there is no real agenda, where you just sit and contemplate, stand and stare, if you like. And personally, this is something that I've learned to value. I used to feel like it was a bit of a luxury I couldn't afford, where you create some space and just sit there and sort of try and solve musical ideas or have creative thoughts or whatever. But these days I understand it's really important, and I'm going to share a few stories shortly. I mean, but a lot of, even writers do it. You have a little space that is your creative space. So I suppose before we get into talking about time, we should talk about an actual physical space. So Stephen King, the writer, talks about, he has a little old desk in the corner of his house under the eaves in a small room with a window where he can just think and create, and he has like an old chair where he just sits and thinks and tries to problem solve. And that's something that I have at home. I have a small house in Bradford in northern England, and I have a little room, and it has a window that looks down the street, and one of my favourite pictures on the wall. And even though I have like a studio, which is a bit of a soulless room full of music equipment, a lot of my creative stuff happens in that room. So the first thing is, if you're trying to create space, is trying to find a place where you are free to come up with ideas, and where I suppose it's free of clutter, where you can just get away from it all. I mean, I have a really tiny house and the room is really tiny, but it's somewhere that really works for me. The next thing I'd recommend, as well as having a space somewhere in your house or your flat or wherever it is you live, is to have a place where you can just get away from it, like a place where you can go for a walk. So Beethoven talks about this. I've got a quote here from Beethoven which I really like. Says, "You may ask me where I obtain my ideas. I cannot answer this with any certainty. They come unbidden, spontaneously. I may grasp them with my hands in the open air while walking in the woods, in the stillness of the night, at early morning. Stimulated by these moods that the poets turn into words, I turn my ideas into tones, which resound, roar and rage until at last they stand before me in the form of notes." So that's Beethoven talking there about getting inspired by nature. So it's really good to find a place near where you're at, where you can just get out and have a walk. Again, with this not having an agenda of any time kind of limit on it, just to try and get away from your instrument and think creatively off the page. I suppose Beethoven's a great example because he wrote the Pastoral Symphony, which is all inspired by nature. And about that, Beethoven also says the following. He says, "No one could love the country as much as I do, for surely woods, trees and rocks produce the echo which man desires to hear." And I think there's just a real truth in that, about having a place in nature to just get away from it all. If you live in a big, busy city, maybe there's a park you can go to, or maybe you could find a drive or get on public transport to a place where you can just get away from it and just make space. And I think it takes a certain kind of bravery to do that as well, especially in this real busy world that we have. Debussy, the Impressionist composer, talks about the effect of nature on the whole on him. So he says, "Does anybody render the forest by recording the heights of the trees? It's more a process when the depths of the forest can give free rein to the imagination." So it's more of a process where the limitless depths of the forest give free rein to the imagination. So here Debussy's talking where just the expanse, the massive expanse of nature, the mountains, the trees, the forest can really inspire you and, I don't know, just kind of connect with you. I know it sounds a bit hippie-ish, but there's definitely something that I experienced. So quite a few years ago I wrote a song called Desert Rose, and at every podcast I kind of try and introduce a musical example from my own compositions, just because that's something that I'm directly connected to, and also I don't need to ask for permission for copyright for putting it on YouTube. So the song goes like this. So that was an idea I came up with, and it was one of those things where I got on the guitar and struggled and struggled and struggled to make that idea into a full song, because obviously one of the biggest struggles of people who are creative is turning that initial kind of idea and inspiration into a full-length song. And one thing that I did to really solve that was each year I come camping, and right now I'm on a camping trip with my family, with my wife and kids, and it's just a real place of joy for me. So yesterday we went out kayaking on a lake, and we slept on an island in the middle of this massive lake in hammocks, and made a fire and cooked food and went snorkeling and swimming in the lake and stuff. But it's great because as the kids are off sort of exploring, it gives me a bit of time to get some space to create. So every year, and this composition took me about maybe 5 or 6 years, and every summer I'd just write an extra bar or 2 bars, and having the space to do that kind of away from the instrument is really important in terms of being able to hear the sounds in my head. So I came up with the next section after that. So that'd be that was a whole summer's holidays worth, the next bit, and then after that I try and take the initial melody from the start, that bit, but take it up the octave, and then using a harmonic. Oops. And the key for me was just making that space to really solve that, and a lot of those melodic ideas were sort of composed away from the instrument, and then I just grab it and try and grab the guitar and try and solve it. And just being sat in a hammock, the beautiful view like the one that you can see behind me, was really key to getting that done. Another song that I've written, which was really comes out of this idea that Debussy talks about being inspired by nature, was a song on my album called Miracle Maker, and it just really connects with this thing that Debussy is talking about, where you're not actually trying to describe anything in actual detail, but it's just the nature itself gives you this kind of musical sense of just, I don't know what word to use really. I guess that's the whole point. I can't think of a word, so I tried to put it into music. So the song starts off with a real kind of Celtic feel, with the melody being played on the low whistle, and that melody just came to me when I was out in Scotland, just walking near lakes and mountains, and we'll just listen to the melody now. So the melody was written away from the instrument, it just came into my head. There was no guitar or anything like that anywhere near me at the time I came up with that. And the next bit we're going to play just really is a way where I use sort of technique and playing more notes to sort of convey sort of excitement, that feel of being uplifted, and the expanse of just the view. And you'll just hear Everything the melody, the phrase starts kind of slow and then builds up and gets more and more and more notey and kind of gets higher and higher. And that's just a way really where I've just sort of imagine a view in my mind of a mountain or a waterfall. Another place I've been which is really beautiful is a place called Yosemite in California. It has a massive waterfall, and you can hear this waterfall from miles away. It's so huge, and that was one of the things I had in mind when sort of coming up with this next phrase. And the reason I'm sharing it is just so that you can see how being in a natural space and having that connection, and even if you're not no longer there, having the memory of it can really help you conjure up something musical. I'll stop talking now and just let you listen to the phrase. The main point of this podcast is, do you make regular creative space? So one way I do this is by going out for a run, and I listen to podcasts and stuff like that, making space. And I really view that as still being part of my working day rather than just a luxury. Sometimes just going for a walk through the woods, especially in winter where it's snowing and stuff like that. And I used to feel guilty for taking that time to do that. Now I really understand that to be creative, you've just got to sometimes just take a break from the grind of life and really value that and view that as work time as well. See what I mean? If you're a creative person, you've got to view that as an investment, a valid investment. So you have my full permission to start doing that. The second time is, do you have a place where you can go to get away from it all on a regular basis? So, is there a park you can go to? Is there it could be an art gallery, it doesn't really matter what it is, as long as it's a place where you can just switch off and get really in touch with your thoughts and your creativity. If you don't, you need to have a think, have a look around, go exploring, make some time today to just get out about in your neighbourhood and see what there is. And finally, do you have a place you can get away to? This is really important. A friend of mine, Tom Quayle, I was chatting to him, and he said he was, struggling, well, not really struggling, but he needed some inspiration to get his album together, and I suggested just booking a cottage and getting away from it and writing, and so that's what he did. He got away, he booked a cottage for a week, didn't take his phone or anything like that, and he found that he got more done in that week than he got done in years before that in terms of working on his album, and that's something I found to be true as well. And obviously, if you're like me, a musician who's starting out, don't have huge amounts of money to get away, then it's one thing you could do is maybe ask around your friends who live in a different part of the country. Could you go to their house and just get away from it that way, use the spare room? I'm really blessed that I have a friend called Jaden Rose, the guitar maker, who's made the electric guitar that I play in most of my videos that you see, and he lives in Wales in the countryside, and it's about a 6-hour drive, but when you get there you have to cross a small footbridge over a river, and he's got this sort of cabin that backs out onto the woods and the Brecon Beacons, and where there's miles and miles of forest. And the great thing is he allows me to go down there and spend a week there, and I can just get out, go on a bike ride through the woods and stuff, and that's a great thing that he does there, and that just came from me asking around if there's anybody who could help me out in that way. So, you know, maybe that could be something you could do this week as well. Have a look at where your friends are spread out across the country and see if any of them have a space you could use to get away and get loads of work done. Work. It's funny. It's funny talking about composition as work, really. Being creative. So those are the thoughts, guys, for this BronsCast. Just a short and sweet one because I'm on holiday. Just 15 minutes there as opposed to the hour-long epics that I usually do. But I hope you found that useful. If you did, make sure you get in touch with me or leave me a review on the iTunes podcast site. Drop me an email, info@davebrons.com. And just let me know how you're getting on with these podcasts. I've got another one coming soon which will be quite a bit longer. But for now, take care, get creative, and start putting your creativity out there for the world to see and hear. Alright, take care guys, see you soon.